So they're kind of like the third party that is helping connect the students to the employer and the employer to the student, because it is difficult. Not all schools have like a work-based learning coordinator or something of that nature. Like I know the high school that I came from, like we did have actually 2 internship coordinators. That is not the norm for schools. And so actually some of the schools in Milan, for example, funded a position.
My personal belief, I'm more on like the portfolio. Here's the skill, some way to verify learning has taken place using a portfolio sort of model. And it seems to me like that's where the ball is moving. I had the Walmart Foundation on, and they're doing a lot of work around that. Like, how do you verify skills? And then from the employer side, they're looking at it like, we know this job, to do it well, you need these skills. Mm-hmm. So on the other side, here's an employee who went through some program like this. And
you are listening to the Global CTE Podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE Podcast. I am your host, Sylvester Chisom. This is the place where we like to wrap a blanket of goodwill around our career tech education community and highlight the best, the brightest, the movers, the shakers, and the innovators. Today is no different. We have a truly special treat. I have some real rock stars here from the state of Indiana's Department of Education. My good friend Michelle Clarke and Kelsey Peaper are here. Let me drop their bios really quick, okay? Michelle Clarke is an experienced educator with 22 years of teaching, school counseling, and leadership roles. Michelle currently holds the Director of Student, School, and Family Engagement position at the Indiana Department of Education. She recently obtained her licensed mental health certification, furthering her commitment to supporting students, families, and educators with mental health needs in school. Let me tell you about Kelsey Peaper. She's the Assistant Director of Student, School, and Family Engagement at the Indiana Department of Education, where she brings over 16 years of invaluable experience in the field. In her current capacity, Kelsey plays a vital role in providing comprehensive support, professional development, and expert guidance on multi-tiered systems of support, family and community engagement, teacher and staff engagement, employability skills, mental health, and the management of federal and state grants. They both are deeply involved in caring about education in the community, as you can see from both of them working on the Educational Outcomes Task Force for the Commission of Improving the Status of Children in Indiana. Kelsey and Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, Sylvester.
Listen, I'm so excited to have you both here. I feel like right now I was trying to think, who's the dynamic duo? I'm like, is it Reggie Miller and Mark Jackson right now? Or do I have Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston? But either way, like, you two are crushing it in the state of Indiana with the work that you all are doing. I wanted to ask you first, like, what's the origin story? How do you get here?
Well, I can go ahead and start. I was a longtime educator, and in 2019 took the jump to come to work for the State Department of Ed as the school counseling specialist. So I was a school counselor prior to coming to the state. Always had a passion for engaging students in school, helping them find their career and post-secondary success, helping with their mental health. And so I took the position at the state in 2019, right before the pandemic. So that was kind of an experience. I'm not going to lie, being here through COVID, where we were remote for a year and a half, and helping support schools through that era was it was interesting. Lots of things changed during 2020 to 2024. But then throughout that time, have worked as the assistant director to our team that is now the Student School Family Engagement team, and now lead the team in our efforts to promote student wellness, student employability skills, career education, post-secondary, just all the things. I feel like our team does all the things. And I'll let Kelsey introduce herself.
Yeah, what about you, Kelsey?
Yeah, so I'm a longtime educator. I started out my career in education as a special education high school teacher. I feel very fortunate. I've been able to move around the country and work in many different districts and schools, both like traditional district public schools as well as public charter schools. So I've worked in Los Angeles and New York teaching, and then now most recently here in Indianapolis. Sorry, I'm used to saying Indy for those who don't know. Indianapolis. And so most recently was an elementary special education teacher as well as their administrator. So an assistant principal over all of special education, student services, student supports, wraparound services. So pretty much everything we do on our team, just at a more micro level in a school for kindergarten through fifth grade students. And then after that, like most educators will tell you as you're approaching, I left during 2020. Just, it was a lot. And so this position opened up as an assistant director for this team as well. So then I applied. And here I am. So doing the same work, just at a macro level, don't have a license in mental health, but have years of experience being in the field, supporting schools and students and families and communities within this work specifically. So, yeah.
You're making me think about something. I have to ask this, like making that jump, like you said, with the direct impact with students to move into the macro level at the state. What's one big insight that you learned that you didn't know, like in terms of the difference of working on the same problem, but at like different levels?
I've learned so much. Like, I'll speak for myself. Like, I think about this a lot. Like, I'm not the same educator that I was in 2019 that I am now, just because I've learned, I feel like working for the state's like going back to school. Like, I have just learned so much just about ed reform, ed policy, legislation, Indiana code, how things from the top down, how the systems interact, all the agencies. Funding is a huge thing that I had no idea about. Like, how can you secure funding to do initiatives? There's just so many factors at play when it comes to serving kids that I didn't even know. Like, I was so in my lane right before. Right. And my passion to do well by students hasn't changed. It's just the lens in which, decisions are made. So,
yeah.
I like how you said that.
No, I agree. I think it's an appreciation of kind of the big picture that you don't often get when you're in schools. It is very different. The hardest part, I guess I can say for me, has been not having the direct service, direct impact that you see on a day-to-day basis, and you can, like Michelle said, kind of work in your own little silo most of the time, knowing that there are a lot of other external factors that are going to impact fundamentally what you do, the system you're working in, all of the infrastructures, all of those things that are coming down on you from a policy lens, funding, resources. That's very true. But you kind of get to tune some of it out a little bit when you're in a school and you really are laser focused on what's best for kids, what's best for families, what's best for the community. And that part I really miss. You feel a little removed, even though that's still, like she said, my mission, my values, my beliefs is that fundamentally all these things, right, hopefully are still doing just as much and making just as much of an impact for kids and families and the school communities, but you just don't see that immediate, tangible, result, which
I think we miss working with youth. At least, I do. Yeah. I actually, this is kind of funny, but I've been teaching a health course in the summer online. I still just like to dabble in you. Like the other day, a student was like, "Thank you so much for teaching me health." And I was like, those are the things I miss about being in office and making decisions and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, I think I can do more in this role than I could where I was. So,
yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I noticed that as my friends in education move from classroom to principal or to, assistant superintendent or moving to the, the state level, you're working on solving those problems of, trying to prepare our students for success, but you move further away from that direct impact. And I know sometimes that can be challenging, where you go from working with kids every day to working with adults to impact kids. So thank you for sharing that. For perspective, Michelle and I, we were speaking on a panel together for career education colleges conferences. Yeah, career education colleges and universities conference. Right.
That's what
right. There's so many acronyms with all these conferences.
All the acronyms in education.
We had such a great conversation. It was Michelle, myself, and Tim, CEO of America Succeeds, and we're talking about durable skills and employability skills. And this is when I found out about all the great work you all were doing in the state of Indiana. And Michelle, you mentioned it, funding. So let's talk about employability skills, innovation, and implementation grant. And like, what's the story behind that? How did that get started? So we can jump into these employability skills.
Yeah. So, gosh, was it 2021 that we started this, or 22? Yeah. 2021. Feels like it was yesterday, but it must have been 2021. But we, as you know, the states received a large amount of funding through the ESSER or CARES funding during the pandemic. And so in the work that we were doing as we were defining the profile of who's your graduate in our Indiana GPS, or Graduates Prepare to Succeed, came about the talk. And the question became, how can we measure student employability skills? Because that is a huge part of the work that we're doing as we're creating this profile of a graduate. And so at first we thought maybe we wanted to fund like a system or something to track employability skills. But as we got into the conversation, we determined that we kind of wanted to throw it to the LEAs or the school districts to see how they would be innovative with funding to track, validate, verify, teach employability skills in their K-12 systems. So we created a grant. It took its name called the ESSE, but it was the Employability Skills Innovation Implementation Grant. And we awarded 58 school districts $10.5 million to work on their employability skills, innovation and implementation. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
What was the initial feedback when that came out, like from the schools, when they're like, oh, here's an opportunity to work on this? Like, what were some of the thoughts that were coming back?
I think they're excited. We awarded 58, but I think we had like almost 160 applications for the grant. It's a competitive grant too. But we knew we had a certain amount, right, of money. And so also at a state level, you have to determine, if we have this bucket of money, how do we award? If it's a competitive grant, is it we award as many as possible and everyone gets X amount? Do we award the people based off of the application who scored the best and fully fund them with everything they're asking? And so like, those are just things you have to balance when you're thinking at a like more macro level. We were intentional though about making sure the spread was across the state. Indiana is actually interesting because we have a very urban centers. I mean, most states do too, but we have just some of these urban pockets that are actually all over, as well as then you have very rural areas that have little to no access to resources and funding. So we made sure we were really being as equitable as we possibly could in distributing the funds across the state between urban, suburban, rural types of schools, private, public. We also opened it up to our education service centers, serve like a consortium. So then they were the sub-grantee, and then they were funding and supporting their schools within their regional area around this grant specifically. We tried to be as diverse as we possibly could in terms of how we funded. I would say people were really excited. I mean, like I said, I think we had a lot of applications and it was hard to narrow it down. We had some folks, full transparency, as you do as a state agency, we had some folks coming to the table prior, like wanting funding for X, Y, Z initiative, because they knew the state had a bunch of money. And so this allowed us to be able to distribute that money, in a more equitable way, to allow multiple individuals to have some funding to try different initiatives versus like funding one initiative and then having everybody have to do the same thing. So I think it ended up
allowing us to glean a lot of information of what would work, who's out there, who's doing this work. So, yeah.
You two led this process. Is that correct? This was your baby?
It was. Yeah. We wrote our first
writing the grants application, to collecting the applications, to scoring and rating the applications, to notifying them, the award letters, the press releases, contracts, which that was a new thing also, at least for me.
Yeah, contracts in 58 states or 58 schools, not states, is a lot.
Wow, so. That's impressive. Hats off to you all for using the employability skills of, I'm going to add critical thinking there. So with that being said, so from the America Succeeds case study, I read that the grant integrated 3 key employability skills: collaboration, communication, and work ethic. So I'm curious why those 3 skills.
So those skills, and that's why I laugh, I said I was going to make Kelsey answer it, but they were a part of the creation of our Indiana Graduates Prepare to Succeed. So when our kind of the profile of a Hoosier graduate came to be, those were identified as, so communication and collaboration. So there's 5 characteristics. Communication and collaboration was 1, work ethic was 2, and then there was 3 more, academics, post-secondary readiness, civic, financial, digital literacy. So we kind of pulled the 2 skills or employability skills of the characteristics, and that was the focus. Indiana actually had identified in 2019 alongside, there was an advisory group that created 18 employability skills standards, or employability skills and standards, with the partnership of Department of Workforce Development. And so we had those already identified. And so this just kind of honed in on 3. And since then, we've even done more research as to what skills are more valued in the classroom and in the workforce, and how we can focus more on those. So I think that's a long story of how we really got to communication, collaboration, work ethic. It's not that the others aren't important, and a lot of our schools still hold any other of the 18, whether it was all of them or some of them, but we really have focused on those 3 and continue to do so with the new high school diploma requirement. So,
okay. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that as it relates to what you guys are working on now and moving this work forward. But before I dig into that, let's go a little deeper. I want to hear some outcomes. Like what did schools, what did districts do? Anything interesting in the urban areas or the rural areas? What stands out?
Yeah. So there's one school, more rural, south of Indianapolis. There's actually 2 schools down there, Batesville and Milan. Milan's actually Hoosier. The movie is based off of their basketball team, for any basketball fans. So when we did go down to visit, we got to hold the trophy. And stand there. Just a little fun fact. Both of those schools, actually, we were very impressed with what they were able to do with their grant funding. Batesville specifically took one of their former students. He actually was a staff member. He was an educator at the school, but then they moved him into a position that he was pretty much fully funded to kind of do this work for their school.
Oh, wow.
Milan also took their school counselor and really honed in on her doing this work also. So the grant actually really supported that creation of that job specifically, so that she could solely do a lot of this work. Both of them, what they did very well was a lot of work-based learning for their students, getting their kids out into the field, getting them credits for school through work-based learning so that they were getting those hands-on experiences. Batesville also invested a lot in the Compass assessment, which is similar to the RIASAC, which is when students take it, they get a strengths, interests, what else? Values result. that then helps them be able to kind of discuss how they operate in the world, right? Whether it's school, whether it's work. And from that, we're really able to then identify like, hey, I really am interested in this. These are some of the career paths I could go on. These are some of the pathways I could, and then help the school be able to really direct students towards strengths, interests, and values when it came to life beyond the K-12 system. They also leaned in on a platform that would teach some of these skills. And then as they did the lessons in an advisory, data was collected through the system. That was an online system. And so not only do they have a profile of their strengths, interests, and values, as they're learning about it, the data was being tracked to see how, right?
What skills
they're being, And then also with that, they did a lot of work-based learning. So we actually had kids interview with America Succeeds and the Department of Ed to just kind of talk about their experience doing kind of this whole thing. And I will say Batesville was kind of already doing this work, but I will say the grant funding, I think, bolstered their ability to do it even more. What's really, I think was magical about Batesville is like they were all bought in. Which is a huge takeaway, at least for us at a state level, that you have to be fully bought into this model of like, I'm never going to master communication, but I can really right? Like I can get better at it.
Yeah.
Every new skill I learn, I get better and better and better, right? I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly growing. It's that continuous learning, malleable intelligence kind of thing. And their principal is very much bought in at Batesville High School. Like he will preach it over and over. And he made all of his staff also take the Compass assessment so that there was a shared language between staff, educators, faculty members with students. So you could have these robust conversations.
The students identified too, like they were able to articulate their strengths and how it connected into their work-based learning experiences. So that's again, connecting to youth, it was really cool to see when we went to visit and interviewed them that they were able to say, like, because I did, had this assessment, because we had these skills, like I was able to apply that in my internship or experience that they had. So
that's so good. And Kelsey, I think you just hit on something I think that gets overlooked is that we're all still working on our communication skills, right? It's like, we go from this foundational knowledge to mastery, but like, I almost want to say mastery is like a moving target. It's like always going up in all of these employability skills. It's like we're working on it continuously, whether we're in the 9th grade or 6th grade or 3rd grade, or we're 20 years into our career. It's like there's still an opportunity for us to improve on all of those. And I definitely appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes when I hear conversations around like the durable skills or employability skills, it's like, how do you know they've mastered it? And it's like, well, do we? We've
had that conversation. I laugh because like that's kind of been the question, is how do we show mastery? And Kelsey's really good at always saying like, these skills are ongoing and evolving and you can master them, but you're always going to be growing those skills. So, yeah.
Yeah. With that being said, this is something I'm always curious about. And I hear conversations around and we're still trying to figure this out, like assessments. How do you thoughts around assessments of these skills? Any best practices that were uncovered during this process, or any unique assessment tools or strategies that you all saw being implemented?
Well, I think it was pretty clear a lot of folks did not want like an assessment. So, we tried, this was a different project. We did like a micro credential where students had to kind of go in and, I don't know, they weren't artifacts. Yeah. I think that some of the assessments that we saw and heard about were more of like portfolio type, again, artifacts, but actually like in the flesh, not through, a computer program. But it was really just students creating portfolios based on the experiences that they had. And then also like verification done by other parties. So that's something we're kind of grappling with now to this day is like, what's the best way to assess skill? Because you're always growing. It can be very subjective. But we don't want to have like there are some states, I think it's like Virginia or something, that actually does like a test. Like kids go on and do an assessment, like they're in their work-based learning and then they do this like, like another iStep or iLearn or SAT type thing where it's a test and it shows. But I don't know if a lot of educators feel the same way. They liked the idea of having a menu of options on how to assess.
I've had, it's funny you're saying this, I've had several guests on the podcast around micro-credentials and badging. I had Noah Geisel. Do you know Noah out of Colorado? This may be something for you all to look into. The Badge Summit. Yeah. He runs the Badge Summit out of University of Colorado at Boulder. And it brings together everyone, conversations around learning employment records. Are you guys familiar with LERs?
Yes.
That's moving in that direction. More like my personal belief, I'm more on like the portfolio, verify, here's the skill, some way to verify learning has taken place using a portfolio sort of model. And it seems to me like that's where the ball is moving. So I had the Walmart Foundation on, and they're doing a lot of work around that. Like, how do you verify skills? And then from the employer side, they're looking at it like, we know this job, to do it well, you need these skills. Mm-hmm. So on the other side, here's an employee who went through some program like this and they have these skills, and here's the verifiable work or badge or here's the badge, but then here's the verifiable work connected to said badge.
Yeah.
And eventually we'll have some system that lines all of that stuff up.
I know. That's what's so cool about technologies. That was another thing about our grant. A lot of the LEAs had a relationship with a vendor or kind of working towards that. Some of our partner schools are working with a new innovator on a technology where it's still in the works, and they're trying to use I think it's so cool just before I learn about AI, but it has the ability to for students to enter certain activities that they've done, and then the AI can crosswalk it with our standards and then identify what skills they have because of that experience or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of mind-blowing to me, but I think it's kind of cool, to think that could be the direction that we're going, where, again, the students are earning badges or micro-credentials or credentials because of, they're able to their skills verified.
I'm curious, do you think it's okay for the teacher or facilitator to be the person to verify a portfolio of work in terms of the skill? You think, does that make logical sense to you all?
I think it's Jason used to say this all the time, both and, because we do. But again, that's so subjective because everybody is looking at it through a different lens. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think right now we're trying to see how we can have verification from a third party, whether it's an employer or a Girl Scout leader or something, that isn't necessarily the educator that can come, or someone can come into the school and do an interview with a student and against a rubric and state that they have these skills. Because employers, through America Succeeds, they did have some conversation with employers where it was determined that the employers didn't necessarily trust the educators to be the validators of the skill. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but right? Am I saying that correctly? They wanted to be the ones to
verify
and
validate. Okay.
Value in the educators being able to contribute to the conversation. Some of the skills are, they're utilizing the skills. They're not you can only use communication in your English class, right? That's not a real thing. We use communication all the time. We collaborate with people all the time. Hopefully you show work ethic across all domains in your life, right? So I think it's a both. And there is value to having educators be able to contribute to that validation or verification. It's just one small piece of it, right? It's not the whole picture of the student. Just like you wouldn't take one kid's math score and be like, well, they're an A student, right? You look at the whole transcript, right? The whole kid and their experiences. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because one of the things I was curious your thoughts on that, because so like one of the things in our curriculum, we offer badging for entrepreneurial foundations, and then workforce readiness foundations. So like the students have to present their portfolio, and then we have like a governing body, a group of employers and educators, like third party, to review those before approving said badge. So I mean, it's still such that's why I'm just curious, because I'm hearing so many different things on how people approach it. I appreciate you all sharing that insight. I am curious, from the employer engagement side, like how do you all think about creating that shared vision for student preparedness and trying to facilitate that meaningful work-based learning opportunity?
I think one of the things we're trying to do is like use third party, like regional, like to kind of help with that connection. We have some orgs in Indiana that do a really good job of bridging the gap between employer and educator, help build those relationships. Like there's a lot of stuff coming out of the commission right now. We have like a career coaching grant where we had, what do they call it? Intermediaries. I was like, what's the term? I was losing it for a second, but we're calling them intermediaries. So they're kind of like the third party that is helping connect the students to the employer and the employer to the student, because it is difficult. Not all schools have like a work-based learning coordinator or something of that nature. Like I know the high school that I came from, like we did have actually 2 internship coordinators. That is not the norm for schools. And so actually some of the schools in Milan, for example, funded a position for specifically connecting the dots between employer and students. So I think that's a consideration that policymakers will need. If we want to keep going this direction, I think there needs to be funding to have intermediaries or that person in the school that leads that charge. I don't know. Did I answer that question? Sorry.
Yeah, no. That was good. That was good. That was good. I think as you just said that, I'm having like a lot of thoughts here. I know it's important to both of you that this work doesn't just live exclusively in the state of Indiana, that it can be helpful for other states who want to move this sort of initiative forward with employability skills. Tell me more about the playbook that you all created, and how's that? Any feedback from other states? Curious about that.
Yeah, so out of the SE grant, we partnered with America Succeeds as well as Learners Centered. Partners with America Succeeds a lot around their durable skill work. So through the grant, we were able to get the case study from America Succeeds, as well as who came along with us was Learners Centered, going to all the schools, interviewing students, kind of pretty much summarizing and synthesizing what she was pretty much seeing on the ground based off of our grant. Also, because they are a national organization, they also see it from a very broad scope in terms of nationally across the nation. These are some best practices that people are doing. Here are some things. Now, like you said, it's not like perfect because not every single school in said state is doing it. Not every state is doing it this way. But what's beautiful about the Employability Skills Playbook is it pretty much is take an assessment at the beginning to determine where you are and where you fall within implementation of employability skills, tracking, teaching, all of those things. Then from there, the website pretty much just directs you to a bunch of examples, resources, literature about where you currently are, and then what are the steps that you need to continue to fully execute this to fidelity if you are looking to do any sort of innovation or implementation around employability skills. So what I actually appreciate is you'll see schools like Milan and Batesville from our grant on the website. I also actually see a vendor on there from the state of Indiana who partnered with 26 of our grantees specifically. Okay. So Equitable Education Solutions, and how they're kind of going about tracking and validating. They're a third party, they're a vendor. And schools partnered with them to be able to kind of start to teach these skills, track these skills, and crosswalk them across Indiana actual academic standards as well as employability standards. Okay. And then you'll see examples from California. You'll see examples from Idaho. You'll see examples and resources from the East Coast. So it's really, I think, a comprehensive picture of kind of the landscape around employability skills right now across the nation, that people are doing really wonderful things. There's bits and pieces of this whole big picture that people, or puzzle, I guess, that people have. We're all kind of putting our piece in the puzzle. It's not a complete picture yet, but I will say that the employability skills playbook, I think, does a good job of kind of getting it all into one location. So if anyone is interested, they can check it out and kind of see. And there's resources and links and articles and examples from other schools. And if schools were willing to share their specific resource, it's linked there. So
it also takes you through at any level. So at the beginning, she created this little assessment or quiz that you can take to determine where to start on the continuum. So if you are a state that, has more information, you can start a little further down the road. But if it's something that is brand new, it takes you from the beginning. So it was really creative how she did that.
I'm you just said something, Michelle. I'm curious, age-wise or grade level, where do you think we should start introducing these employability skills?
As early as possible.
Little. Yeah, we went to San Diego and visited David, what's his last name? Maya Shiro, does the World of Work, and Ed Hidalgo at Cajon Valley.
Yes.
Unified. Yeah. But they have integrated career education, World of Work focus from pre-K. It was really cool to see how they were doing lessons on careers and using the RIASEC to help connect students to their skills, interests, and values, even at 3 and 4 years old. So, yeah. And those are things apparently that don't change. Your skills, interests, and values apparently don't vary very much in the years. Maybe the career you choose, but kind of your RIASEC kind of stays the same. It's who you are as a person. So I thought it was kind of cool to have kids start thinking about what are your strengths, and then what would you be really good at, and think about that earlier than just right now. We do it at high school. It's 8th grade. What do you want to be when you grow up? They dabble a little bit, but it's not as robust as it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look them up. The World of Work. You said in San Diego?
Yeah, Cajon Valley, California.
Yeah, I have to check them up. That's cool. So I'm curious. In our pre-show conversation, we talked a little about the future of all of this and how it fits into. You all are reimagining the high school diploma. Can we just get a little insight into what are you all doing with that work?
So we are currently going through the process of new diploma requirements to the state of Indiana, and it is in the rulemaking process. So there is currently a rule that's out for current public comment. The uniqueness of this diploma or these diploma requirements is that we are including competencies. So students not only have to meet credits or certain courses, but they're also being asked to essentially verify skills through competency-based work or artifacts or observations or badges or however is determined. Some of those verifications actually have to be outside of this third party. So it'll be interesting. Right now, we're really trying to create guardrails onto what that looks like. But I know we're leaning in a lot to the work that we did with the SE grant and how and what that could look like for schools as if this ends up being the route that we take. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, that's a great summation. I would just add that I think the point of doing this reimagining was to afford kids youth students more flexibility as they're thinking of themselves outside of the K-12 education system. So
a huge component too is work-based learning. So it is a current requirement right now to have employability skills in our graduation pathway. So it can be service-based, work-based, or project-based learning. But for what we're calling Diploma Plus, the students would have to have a verified work-based learning experience. So really focusing on getting students outside of the classroom walls to gain experiences and skills.
I love it. You two are, I knew I was right. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with, I was right with my Reggie Miller and Mark Jackson. You two are like, pass it and shoot the three. Like you guys are crushing it. My last question, I asked this to everyone. I'm curious what you two are going to say, being that you both are innovative thinkers. What is your vision for the future of career tech education?
I know. I don't know. I can speak for myself. I think expanding it is really exciting for me as someone who worked as a school counselor for a while. Career tech ed was kind of a small group of students, right? That we were sending kids to a career tech ed center in Indianapolis, like from Noblesville, like an hour away. But because of this shift in thinking, we now, where I live, have students doing career tech ed in our community and creating more spaces for that to occur. So I have one student actually that I still see because she's now a dental assistant at my children's pediatric dentist, but she went through like the dental assisting program and just really thrived. And as a result of her internship she had as a senior, it was a kiddo that struggled in school. Wasn't like a bad student. She just, I think college would have been a lot. And her mom is like always like, I'm so glad, thankful that she had this experience. And so I think it opens doors. I know for me talking to my own daughter, like, you could be a dental assistant and you can do some of it in high school, or I don't know, just having more conversations. I don't know, it just opens so much more doors.
I love, Kelsey, before you go, I love that. I think it's so important that our youth find themselves in the work, so that they can commit to it, be passionate, find success and happiness post-secondary for sure. For sure. Kelsey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, mine's not very different than Michelle's. I just also think I am a mother as well, but my little one's only 2. Not that that is not too young to start talking about this stuff with her though. And I will lean back on my education, my time as an educator, and thinking of my population specifically that I worked with were all my exceptional learners, with often many of them had IEPs. That's really kind of held them to a specific box, right? Like you're not good at XYZ subject, right? Or they didn't have any other options. And so the access wasn't really there for them, nor was the know-how, the resources, the knowledge. No one was really going to bat for them in this sense. Like I said, my first 2 years I was teaching in high school, and it was kind of like the push was still, you just got to graduate, like with no discussion about like, what are you interested in? What do you see yourself doing after you graduate high school? Yeah. What wakes you up in the morning? Like, if you could pick one thing you could do where you feel like you're really contributing and making like a difference, if that's important to you, what would that be? And there really was no support for me as an educator to do that either. And so like, really, I was writing IEPs. I was teaching a class that I was also just learning about, as a new teacher, I didn't have what I needed, the skills myself, the resource, the knowledge. And so in a sense, I was doing my students a disservice, right? Because I wasn't able to provide that for them. And so really, like not just expansion, but like access and resources and knowledge and understanding, and true people in school buildings who understand this deeply. Like we invest the time, the energy, development into somebody who really knows this very well, so that, right, if a student wants to become a welder. I'm picking that again. We always joke welding is the one that everyone goes to. Fine. That's a medical tech, like whatever. Like there's somebody at every school so that kids have access to be able to understand this and learn about it deeply and have someone to talk to about like, actually, I wake up every morning and I want to do this. This is like, this is what I want to do. I'm excited and I'm passionate about it and it makes me happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so glad. I'm so glad I met both of you. I can really tell you have a heart for the work that you're doing. Like it really comes through. And so I just say thank you for the work you're doing for youth in Indiana and sharing that work across the country. With that being said, if someone is interested in learning more about the work you all are leading, or if they want to reach out, is there any information you want to share or direct them to?
Yeah, if you go to the Department of Education website, you can just type in, there should be a better way, but the best way is just to type in employability skills and it will pull up our page that has all of our information, including our playbook linked. I think that is probably the best place to get information. You can also get our contact information there as well.
Outstanding. And we'll make sure to link the playbook in the show notes as well. Thank you all. Michelle, Kelsey, thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge with our learning community. To the learning community, if you enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share it with a friend or a colleague who needs to hear these great insights and gems that were dropped today. Until the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.